And the pattern that I was continually seeing was these parent coaches, and some had tennis experience and some didn't. And I was like, why? Like I'll ask why are parents having so much success? And granted, like there's a lot that don't. Like I'm not saying all parents need to get out there and start coaching. But when you look at the pros, there are so many like parent coaches active or parents that assisted along the way.
Yeah, heavily involved along the way.
Yeah, and it came back to me as this trust piece, because a kid, in a weird way, like, and parents openly admit like they care more about their kid than themselves, like, and so credibility they may not have necessarily an experience, but they're actually strong.
Hello, Matthew, Teivans. We're here. This guy's really hard to get a hold of. He is not here in the country very often. So when we can, we try to grab him with two hands and just hold him tight because, yeah, the opportunities are few and far between. So you have a big and strong tennis background. You played super intense as a kid. You lived and breathed it. Played Div 1 college, State League of 13, played top of State League here for many years, couple of State League Grand Finals, couldn't get over the line. And you've been a massive pillar and influence for me. I feel like I've become a much better coach through like almost doing the internship, through just following your journey and asking you heaps of questions, picking your brains, because I feel like you have just an absolute love for the game. And you've just been someone that's just been open to learning and growing through the journey that you've been on. So it's been helpful for me to follow in those footsteps and learn from what you've been doing, and then take on that, use it for myself and apply it in my own way, which has helped me become a much better tennis coach through my own experiences as well. So I'm super keen and curious to know about, how did your coaching journey start? And what made you transition from being a player to then a coach?
Yeah. Well, I'll probably take it back to when I was 14. And so my first ever job, I was a hitting partner. And I was a paid hitting partner. And when you get paid, you sometimes feel like you have to speak, you have to help, you have to talk. And even though my role was a hitter, I started helping. And I really liked the way I could impact a player. I felt it even from then. I was like, I'm having a positive effect here, or so I felt I was. So it probably started then at 14 was it was kind of my first job. And it's really stayed that way ever since. So, I mean, there's been many, I guess, coaching practices that I've been involved in. I've worked for a lot of people, particularly when I was young. But coaching started as a hitter. And then I found a passion for it through honing my craft and actually realizing I was probably okay at it. And then that actually drove my passion further. So it was like I got into something and I was like just doing it. And then I started to realize I was okay at it, and it made me want to become better at it. And that kind of, I guess, drove my journey and pursuit into coaching.
When did you start to realize that? When you start to go, hang on a minute, I'm actually doing okay at this. This is maybe leading somewhere.
From a pretty early age. Yeah, even when I was coaching at, 18, 19, 20, because it was always a part-time job there as I was trying to play, or I was at college, or I was coaching summer breaks, or so I was always doing a lot of it, and I was finding that I was having reasonable success, and success is really only judged by players improving or players coming back and wanting more. So if you're doing a lesson and then the next minute they're like, I want to do another one, you kind of know you're doing something right there, just from like a relationship point of view. You know what I mean? Like, it's like they want to go again. So that was probably like my first inclination of going, I think I'm okay at this. And yeah, that really drove the thirst to become a coach. Yeah.
Were there any pivotal moments that started to catapult it in a new direction, that where you maybe learned from someone or made like a commitment to go, well, I'm going to take this to the next level, or I'm not going to work for anyone, I'm actually going to start something for myself?
Yeah, I'll probably rewind back to college. So there was a US summer. I was going to come home, and one of the guys on my team, it was Fernando Gonzalez's cousin. So he was on my team, and he was just a real funny lad. Like, and he was like, what are you doing going home? Like, he's like, you need to come to Harvard with me and the guys and do a coaching internship there. He's like, it's Harvard. Like, it'll be on your CV for the rest of your life. And I was like, yeah, I guess I'll do that. Like, I didn't really know what it all meant. And that was my first serious intro into, I guess, formally learning biomechanics. So that threw me into like, whoa, okay, now I'm learning how to formally teach strokes. And I loved it. I enjoyed it. Didn't think too much of it. Kind of left it there. Didn't really revisit it, and still coached a lot since that. And then that drove me to, I was just coaching, playing, doing like part-time stuff, finishing off uni. So I was just it was really just complementing my life coaching at that point. And then as I was finishing my degree, I realized that I wanted to coach, and a mentor of mine, he used to coach me a little bit. It was a guy called Graham Neville. He kind of said, I mentioned that I wanted to go to Brisbane and coach at an academy, and he was like, he's like, you learn so much. So at that point, I moved to Brisbane to take on a coaching position, which is pretty like full on, really, when I look back at it. At the time, I didn't think much of it, but when I look back, I was like, I actually moved to Brisbane for that. Like, wow.
I remember that time. You just picked up and left, just out of nowhere.
Yeah, so I was like, moved to Brisbane, and that's where I actually learnt like the commercial side of running a tennis academy, because I was in, and this is, I think, another little kind of advice I would give to younger people is, it's a great opportunity to work in a small business, a fast growth startup, something where you're actually really close to the founders and you can see everything that's going on. Because when you're working in a really big kind of bureaucratic business, there's so many divisions and you've got no idea what that division's talking about, or that room's talking about, or that department. You got no idea. Whereas I was right in the main office with the founder. I was coaching the squad with the founder. And so I just learned so much, like hands-on, of like how to run a tennis academy. And so I did that and learned a lot, and then came back. And in that time, there was an opportunity where a club came up, and yeah, it was Colin Grove. And really what drove me to start this business was my experience at Harvard and my experience in Brisbane. Yeah, and combining those two is really the birth of what we have now.
That's really cool. This is just a quick note on our podcast sponsor. This podcast would not be possible without the support from 4RT. They are a creative house that helps businesses with their advertising, marketing, and content needs. If your business has a story to tell, then these guys can really help you with that story. And through ATA, they've helped us massively, and we trust these guys dearly, and we feel like they're the best in the business. So they could add a lot of value to your marketing and advertising needs. Yeah, I think you've got the best of both there. I mean, you learned some really valuable things from Harvard. Like you really learning from Steve Smith. Is that right?
Yep.
Was it from him himself?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what sort of things were you learning from him in terms of biomechanics of the strokes?
Well, he really believed in, I guess, the physics of stroke production. He wanted to obey physical laws, and it was all about just building a great base. You didn't want to, I guess, in his philosophy was like a lot can go wrong early, and so it's very important to get a nice solid foundation and set strokes up to succeed at a high level. And that's really simplicity. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really important. That's one thing that you've been big on from the start. And really, I think I've gone a lot more in that direction to make sure that you're laying the foundation to the best of your ability, and having almost like too much structure at the start, like a lot of structure in when working with younger children and building their base. And then from there, I guess breaking that mold and breaking that structure a little bit later on and being a little bit more fluid with the strokes. But that base will then set you up for a lot more success to then withstand the speed of the game that rises quite quickly as you get older.
I think biomechanics is a really interesting topic in itself. I think it's important that you go down a biomechanics kind of rabbit hole and really go like, well, what is going on here from a science, physics point of view? But you've got to be able to synthesize it and explain it really simply.
Yeah.
So I think you can go too far into the biomech, but if you can't explain it simply to a kid that's learning, well, then you've gone too far. So I think there's a evolution there in learning biomechanics. Is you probably don't know much, and then you've got to go in a lot and not find out a lot about it, and then come back simply and be able to explain it really efficiently.
Yeah. Did you go massively in that direction with biomechanics early on?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how did that affect your coaching at that time?
Well, I can't say it affected it negatively from any I spent too much time on biomech, but we got to, the game's fast, it's complex, and I probably started to appreciate the individual traits that athletes bring to a solid base, which is kind of what you were talking about before, was that I was maybe getting a little too cookie cutter. Yeah. Like, it's got to look like this. It's got to look like this. And I've definitely become more open-minded and said, yeah.
Yeah, I think you can, that's definitely a trap in itself. Great Base, who you talked about. So Steve Smith from Great Base, we use a lot of their principles as a guide and framework for some of our stroke teaching. I feel like almost they go a little bit very rigid in their stroke production has to be this way, very rigid and all precise. Everyone kind of looks the same. And I guess there's pros and cons to both sides, but it can almost be like, where's the balance there with that? Extremely
rigid. And I would encourage anyone listening to go have a look at his content and dive into it, because I still think it's some of the best out there.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. Yeah, I've learned so much from it.
Yeah. But when you're looking at it and you're dissecting it, I would say don't think that's how you're going to come out the other end. I think you can extract the principles. I like the principles that he teaches.
Yeah. I think with all of this stuff, the principles are key. It's not getting too stuck in, it has to be looking this way.
Correct.
It's just, what's the physics behind this stuff, and how do you extract these principles to actually hit a good, efficient ball off every single stroke?
Yep.
Yeah. Where did this lead? So you basically got all that learning, and then you went to Brisbane. What were some of the key takeaways? You touched on it before about learning the commercial side, but how did you really extract what you learnt there to then make the decision and then implement it when you started your business and the building blocks of ATA?
Yep. So I was actually telling the guy I was working with in Brisbane, I was like, man, you've got to start one of these in Adelaide. And he was like looking at me like, what do you mean? I was like, you'd kill it. I said that to him. I was like, if you take what you're doing here and you move it to Adelaide, I said, like, the market is crying out for it. Like, I know it'll work. And he kind of was like, oh, interesting. Like, didn't really, it was just more like like, thanks for the comment type thing. Like, thanks for the, and then so I guess I always believed in that structure and that setup and that the way they had that academy running. I thought I knew it was going to work here. I never thought I was going to start it here necessarily. But yeah, there was a sliding doors moment where a mate I was actually coaching at the time, he sent me an email and he said, you got to apply for this club. And at the time I wasn't even Tennis Australia qualified, and the club was down the road from where I lived, like literally down the road. I could walk there. And I drove past the club every night wondering, like, who's coaching there? Like, I didn't even know who was there. And yeah, long story short, I went for this club and landed it, and it's next door to another club, and I'm not sure if that was a turn off for many coaches. Like, you know, it was a big club next door, and but somehow, the club kind of became mine. And then I was free to start a business there, and that was like, all right, how does this look?
Yeah, that would have been a crazy time. Super, just like, I have no idea what's going to happen here, but I've got a club, and let's kind of go. Where did the name Adelaide Tennis Academy come from? Why?
Yeah.
Why that? I mean,
well, I was kind of umming and ahhing. I was like, I just had no idea what to call it. I was overcomplicating things, like with these names and getting too far fetched. And my girlfriend at the time was kind of like, why don't you just call it Adelaide Tennis Academy? And I was like, nah. I was like, that name's taken. Like, I can't call it that. And she said, well, just look it up. Like, check if it is. And I looked and I was like, it's not taken. So like literally in that moment, I was like, bang, registered. And then like domain name, registered. Like multiple domain names, like adelaidetennis.com.au, registered. Like boom, boom, adelaidetennisacademy.com.au, registered. I just went like everything. And that, the name, it wasn't all, it had its downsides too at the time. Yeah.
In what way?
Well, it put a massive layer of accountability on me to actually go like, whoa, like, this is nothing. I've literally got no business here, and I've called it Adelaide Tennis Academy. And it was like, I've actually got to make this work. Like, this has to be a success. Like that in my mind, there was no other alternative in my mind. Like I was hell bent on making this work. And really vulnerability and being insecure about it was the fuel. Like that was the fire. That was what actually like, and it's an interesting point there is we all have things we're dealing with. We all have these little doubts or insecurities or fuels. And if we don't use them, well, they kind of use us. But at that point in time in my life, I was able to push it into something. And I really think that's one of the major reasons why I was able to get things moving. Like it was a lot of luck. I mean, a lot of things fell into place. Like when I, think back at it, a lot of luck.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing like having a lofty dream and goal like that to fuel a fire to go, well, I've set myself up here. I'm a target now. I've named this name in Adelaide with no business here. There's literally no one on the courts.
Yep.
I have to do something now because I look like an idiot if I don't.
That was well, it was definitely a strong feeling at the time. Yeah. But but I didn't have much time to think because I just started working.
Yeah. What was that initial phase like, that first 1 to 2 years of just head down and work? What do you remember? What was it like? What were you learning?
Well, the first year I just thought in the first year the business was going to be huge. I literally thought I thought after the first year it was going to be like just pumping, and it wasn't. Yeah, it despite my best efforts, it was growing, and it was giving me like reason to believe this could be a really good thing, but it wasn't where I thought it was going to be. And I think that definitely speaks to something that I'm really passionate about now, is this idea of like patience in the long term, and like real focus in the short term, like daily, like just following process, working hard, doing the right things on a daily basis, but being extremely patient, looking out into the future. And yeah, it's something that I guess I believe in because I've had proof of concept. Yep. When you've done something and you've seen it work, you go, that makes sense. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that a lot of people are struggling with in my generation, our generation, and younger, that they just believe that everything, click your fingers, here now, let me just go from job to job, kind of trying to weasel my way through opportunities and try to get rich real quick. And it's for anyone who wants to start a business, it is a lot of what you're saying. We have these big expectations that things are just going to blow up, and you realize pretty quickly that's not the case.
Yeah.
And it's just honestly as simple as daily energy to what you're doing, and don't stop. Just keep going.
Yeah.
And keep making sure that your intentions are in the right place, and the vision that you're heading towards is something that you actually really want. Because if you start moving in that direction, you realize you don't want it, then of course at some point it's going to break down.
Mm-hmm.
So you just basically knew that this was what you really wanted, and you were just relentless towards working at it. In that first year, did you start to go, yeah, well, I'm really loving this and I really want to keep going in this direction?
Yeah. Like I mentioned before, it was growing. I was having success with players. New players were coming in. I was building good relationships with a lot of young athletes. I made a point early to start. I wanted to actually build and develop players. And so I say that more out of the fact that, like, when you come from a little bit of a playing background, not that I was an unreal player, but when you have a playing background and you can hit, you can start coaching better players, because good players or 14, 15, 16-year-olds, they want to hit the ball around. I didn't really want to do that. So I didn't, that was not a priority at all. For me, starting out, was I actually want the 8-year-old. I want the 9-year-old. I want the 10-year-old that I can build and make a difference too early, and I guess impart my own philosophies and my beliefs and my knowledge into something that was building. So I definitely took I feel like a longer term approach to even starting out, because I didn't want to like recruit players. I actually wanted to like develop and coach players.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I find that one a little bit hard. I prefer working with someone, if I can, from the beginning, or someone that has less experience, and you can really shape with a very nice foundation, like we've been talking about before, like having that foundation where you can set that it's going to be efficient to handle the pace increase as they get better. Because I found it actually really challenging working with players that are already established. I'm not sure if it's the same for you, but it's like they come through and had been doing a few things technically for quite a while, and been having already like a number of different voices in their ear, and it's I find it really hard to actually make change, and you basically got to just almost accept what's going on there, and it's hard to almost pivot and change in different directions sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
How do you go with that balance? I mean, how do you go with working with someone, just say they already come to you as a player? How would you coach them differently to maybe someone that you're working with from like an 8, 9, 10-year-old standpoint?
Yeah, interesting. I think it's about really knowing your athlete and really knowing their identity, their why, like why do they play, and try and delve into the deeper things rather than just, because I think we get a player and we like see something and we're like, I've got to change that. And then you start talking to them and they're like, it's my best shot. And we were going to change it and things like that. So I think you got to really understand the player, how they want to play, their game style, what are they trying to do to win points. And I say win points, that's a probably separate topic. But I'm big on the language around that. Like in terms of, say, how an athlete is trying to win a point. Like, for example, if someone was like, oh, I wait for the opponent to miss, I would like reframe that into, I outwork my opponent, or I put my opponent in difficult positions and frustrate him and draw an error, like rather than wait for him to miss. Because I feel like that's really like negative type passive.
Yeah, it's real passive language.
Yeah, passive language. So I still think like in terms of same concept almost, but it's you're being proactive in how you win points, not. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, that's something that I feel you've been big on from the length of time that I've known you. Is you've always been someone that I guess steers someone in a game style based on their attributes, their physicality, and who they are as an individual. Is that something that you picked up pretty early on? When did you start to make that pivot to go, well, this is kind of who they are as a person, and we need to go in this direction? Because I feel like a lot of coaches maybe fall into the trap of just teaching their own biases of what they know and what they think works best all of the time. But it's not as simple as that.
Yeah. I think an often underlooked aspect to game style is actually personality. Because we look at the physical attributes and we're like, oh, he can do this, or she can do that, or she's going to be quick, or all these things. But you've actually got to know, like, how are they going to play under pressure? Are they going to take it on, or are they going to sit back in their shell? So you could be teaching a really kind of aggressive type game style, but that athlete, when like things get real, is actually going to go into their shell a bit. So for me, it's like really trying to understand, like, how does this athlete really want to play, and particularly how do they naturally play under pressure, like even from an early age. Like, I want to see how they take on the big points. Yeah,
that can really shape things. I think that's made coaching a lot more fun for me in the last maybe 3-4 years, where basically I see someone and what their attributes are, their personality, and then I coach in a way that is more aligned with that. And then it just keeps it different. It keeps it exciting. I feel like no 2 days are the same.
Yep.
I feel like with this player I'm doing a bit of this, and this player I'm doing this, and we're heading in this direction. And it's like, to the outside, it's like you're doing the same thing every day, but I feel like I'm doing different things all of the time, and it keeps it exciting and fresh.
Yep.
Same for you in that way? Like, did you love teaching the game in different ways in terms of like more feel or more creativity for this person who is more aligned in that way, and more big bash, come to the net kind of stuff with bigger athletes?
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, particularly like a young athlete, I think education is front and center. So like, I want to teach this young player, all the strokes, because I don't know what he or she may excel at. I got really no idea. So I feel like I want to teach them all the strokes, to give them a good base. And from there, because I mentioned obviously knowing your athlete, but I think that can be you can go in too early on that. I think when a young kid walks into your club or your center and you're coaching them early, your role is just to teach them tennis, and you need to teach them good strokes. That's what the parents bringing their child there for. And then as that evolves, you start to pick up the little pieces along the way, like, oh, I think they respond to this better, or they learn this way better, or I think they're going to be more inclined to this game style. But it's never static. I look at athlete development as like a greenhouse. You've got to control so many factors, like just like a greenhouse, you've got the humidity, the temperature, the lighting. There's so many factors at play, but it's constantly changing, and you've got to move through it with the athlete. And I think we do a very poor job at times on undermining a young athlete's program in that moment. So like, we've got to understand that for the kid and the parent at 11 years old, that's super important to them. Like they want everything right.
Yeah.
But we're like, oh no, it doesn't matter. You'll be good when you're 18. Like, we're just kind of like, but like in that moment, it's really, really important, like, to get that right and then move it right, like evolve it right. So yeah, big on education at the forefront of a development model. Like that's the first thing I'm going to, is like, I want to teach this kid tennis.
That's just going to give them such a good toolkit moving forward in the long haul to be able to do so many different things. I mean, you touched on kind of like knowing the athlete to figure out when to maybe be more of a listener, when to maybe be a little bit harder, when to, I guess, be a little bit more funny or jovial. When is that like the art of coaching to you? Or how do you kind of navigate and feel the temperature of what to kind of give and the tone to coach from? Because that's something that is really challenging to find.
Yeah. Building a very stable, strong relationship with your athlete, then versus maintaining the highest of standards, is a very tricky, delicate approach, because you're balancing friendship in some cases with this idea of if you don't do this, you're not going to get better. And yes, it's tough now. Yes, I'm being hard. Yes, this is direct, or yes, this is confronting. It's a very, very difficult balance, but coaching really hinges on what I call trust. And I've kind of delved into this topic a little bit more. And trust, there's really 4 factors that create trust. And the 2 principles that we look at are actually not as valuable as what we think. And so when we try and build trust, it's like, one is credibility. So my experience, my qualifications, all this, that's one component that sits, say, up here, credibility. Then you've got reliability, meets deadlines, always there, gives you the time that you thought you were going to get.
Says what they say they're going to do.
Yes, yep. Then there's this component of intimacy, which is like, he actually understands my values. He understands me a bit more as a person. And that's a lot more important than the other 2. Then the credibility and reliability, the intimacy piece is more important. But there's a 4th piece that is actually even more important than that intimacy piece, and that's what you call self-orientation. And in that component, it's actually about not yourself, but the athlete you're coaching. So when the athlete feels it's like he actually almost cares more about me than himself, it's a big shift. And so, because I went down a bit of a rabbit hole where I started to study like player development journeys, and there was this pattern that I was continually seeing. And the pattern that I was continually seeing was these parent coaches, and some had tennis experience and some didn't. And I was like, why? Like I'll ask why are parents having so much success? And granted, like there's a lot that don't. Like I'm not saying all parents need to get out there and start coaching. But when you look at the pros, there are so many like parent coaches active or parents that assisted along the way.
Yeah, heavily involved
like,
along the way.
Yeah. And it came back to me as this trust piece, because a kid, in a weird way, like, and parents openly admit, like, they care more about their kid than themselves. Like, and so credibility they may not have necessarily an experience, but they're actually stronger in the other areas. And I definitely think like that research or that my interest in that has definitely paved or contributed to the coach that I am, and even the philosophy we've got at ATA. I feel like it's built on a lot of care, a lot of passion, a lot of trust. But trust is only built over time through that formula that I was kind of just breaking down.
Yeah, that's really interesting and makes a lot of sense from my observations. What are you seeing with some of these successful parent models? What do you feel they're doing better to help some of these athletes to go to the top end?
Well, I think they can be honest with them. Yeah, I think they can be really honest, because it's not like the athlete knows that the parent truly cares for them. So it's not. Yeah, I mean, I think it sucks at times for a lot of athletes to hear it, but yeah, we were with the boy at the Nadal Academy. He's an Australian, like top player, like 300 in the world, 19-year-old, like he's flying, and he's coached by his dad, and his dad was openly telling me he started coaching him at 2, and he learned off YouTube. Yeah, but just watching that was like, it was so like. We were on the court, like Jonas and me were on the court with him, and it was like, it was real. Like the conversation, like when he told him that, like, don't do this or do that, it was met with real emotion. Like it meant something. Like every practice was important, and the dad was really just telling him the truth, and the truth hurts sometimes, like it hurts, but it was just seeing, I guess, that realness, that passion, how much care there is in what they're doing, and it's really driving them to where they are. Like I said, he's on track. Mm-hmm. He's on track to be a top 100 player, this kid. So yeah,
that's amazing. I think having that base to just be honest, and it does get really real, man. You can see in that environment, that far out, it's going to hurt at times, and they're going to have some brawls, but you can feel the energy that they're both driving it forward, and they both really want to go somewhere, and that's healthy.
Yeah, that's
healthy. I mean, you don't want it to get out of control, but for it to be honest, and for them to actually like both know that they're on the same journey together, heading there, that's sick. And at a national event that I went to, met this really good dad that was coaching his daughter. They were from New South Wales, I think, near Sydney. And he just took it upon himself to basically take the reins, I think, from her when she was maybe like 10 years old. Yep. And been working with her for the last 3 years, I reckon. And he just talked about it so passionately. He was just obsessed with learning, obsessed with getting on YouTube and doing his research, obsessed with looking at who's doing the best things. And they had such a good relationship, and it was really good to see how it can be done in a positive way when they're driving that process themselves. And she knew that he was there for her, and they talked about the bad times as well, and that it's very emotional and hard for him to deal with at times as a parent. And it's a really high pressure job to find that relationship with being a dad or a mum in another instance, and also being the coach, and balancing that relationship's like even harder than what we do as just like the coach player relationship. I think it can end badly if it's not meant, if it's not dealt with a lot of care. And obviously we've seen another circumstance with like Jelena Dokic, for example. It's like, it's really sad. Yeah. Really sad that she's been through some of those things and how tumultuous and terrible it was, and how it can, on the flip side, be really, really managed poorly.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I can't say I'm necessarily advocating for parent coaches. I'm probably more just commenting on the patterns, the data, because I'm about numbers and statistics, and when you see something that's so prevalent and so successful, like I said, it drove me to ask the question, well, why? Like, why is that working so often? On top, but there are so many that don't. Yeah.
Where's the balance with art versus science? I mean, the science behind the game and the physics and the game style, the numbers, the statistics behind winning percentages, etc., and then also like the art form behind it. How do you float between, and what's the balance there, do you think?
Yeah, touched on the biomechanics, like dive into it, like go study it, go learn as much as you want if you're a really passionate coach or passionate parent and you're really trying to help your kid. Come out the other side, simplify it, synthesize the key points that you can communicate it clearly, because you don't really know your subject matter if you cannot communicate it to a young kid that doesn't know much about the game. So that's where I would go from and when you talk about science, I think biomechanics, like that's what I lead to, but there's a lot more data around tactics and things like that, which we can kind of get to, but simplifying the biomechanics and then building the trust piece for me, building the trust piece in that, because coaching is a human relationship. So I think we get confused with teaching and coaching. I think they're different things. Teaching is the ability to transfer the info. Like I want to teach you this. Coaching's more like guiding for me. Like, so they're different. Yeah, very, 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 very different. And it's an evolving piece. Like, it's an evolving piece in terms of development as well. But then coaching on the road and coaching on the tour, like, they're different. They're completely different roles. They're different. They're not the same job. Yeah.
How is that difference? What are you observing? Because you've been on the road a fair bit. What's it like, and what are you observing with coaches that are taking more of that path?
Well, how much when you're on the road and I guess you're on tour, let's say, how much less you say? Like, you're just saying so little, but just being there, watching, listening, all these like I would call like observation skills, because you've actually got to be there when the athlete's like, oh, did you see that? And you got to go, yeah, you did this and this, and like, oh yeah, he was watching, versus like always feeling like you have to be the guy to like jump in and tell them. It's more like you've got to be like always watching and ready when they need you. Yeah.
There's a point with every athlete that starts to shift into that mode, even if you're not a traveling coach. And there is a I think when they start to go through puberty or they start to become like their own individual and they're making more autonomous decisions behind the process, you can feel that shift, and you kind of got to roll with it to be like, okay, well now this person, I need to kind of just be there. I need to say less. I need to kind of just ask them how they felt about this and really let them drive the process a little bit more rather than me driving it or kind of guiding more. Because in initial stages, of course, when you're building the base, it needs to be a lot more like that. But with every player, it's almost like you need to kind of feel the temperature of when that shift is happening. It happens at different ages.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
I was going to add, I love video as a conversation starter. So like I'll like even if you're doing something on technique or you're filming the way they play a point or anything really on the video, it's almost like, what do you think? Like you tell me, because a lot of the times they have the right answer, or they're like, oh, like I look like that, or I didn't do this, or I didn't do, like they know.
Yeah.
So sometimes, like, rather than actually coming with such, like, we want to almost, like, when we're coaching and we're trying to make an impact, we like want to do it right away, but we actually don't get through. So it's been ineffective. So like I find, like, and every athlete's different, but video is a conversation starter, not as video as like, you need, like, I've got it all, what you need to do. I'm talking just, what do you think? Like, tell me.
Yeah, that's a really good way to just let them come to the consensus themselves. Basically, they just like figure out and go, wow, like, oh, it's right there in front of me. I can clearly see what's going on. I can clearly see, oh, I'm not doing this, I'm doing this, and they tell you rather than you telling them. I think that's an important point, to basically let the athlete come up with the answer themselves, to feel like they're learning it themselves.
They're driving this. They particularly, and I'm pretty big on, like, there's all these coaching approaches, direct, indirect, but I just think when it starts out, and Dylan can probably speak to this, but when a kid's learning at 10 years old, like, I'm the coach, I'm going to tell you how to do it. Like, it's pretty direct. Like, I just remember when I was coaching Jonah, like, I'm telling him how to hit the ball. Like, there's no, like, he's not sat telling me, like, oh, I think I should do this in my technique. He's 10. Do you know what I mean? Like, he wants to learn the game. He's young, he's learning. But it definitely shifts. Like, it goes from a very direct coaching style, and it's that needles, or that percentage of direct, indirect is moving towards indirect. It's not very direct, like, and it should be that way, because it should be athlete driven by the time they get to it, as they get older. It shouldn't be coach driven.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've been around a bunch of academies. I mean, you spent only a little bit of time at Moratouglous, but you spent a lot more time at the Rafa Nadal Academy. I mean, aside from the obvious, I mean, the facilities are out of control. I mean, that's what makes it amazing as well. But what's actually going on, and what's like the fundamental structure of why there is success there?
Philosophy.
What is that philosophy?
Yeah, philosophy and clear identity. So you walk into the place and you feel like, when you're watching court to court, it's consistent. So I think that's a big thing when you look at a program. It's not like different everywhere. It's consistent. But a couple of things that really stand out is enduring suffering. Like, you got to love suffering. You got to, like, not even, enduring's the wrong word. Like, love it. Like, love hurting, love the pain. Like, that's definitely embedded into their philosophy. You can't miss the same ball twice. Like, really, once again, really basic. But like, if you miss a forehand cross, it's like, boom, ball. All of a sudden, the ball's been fed in, and you got to hit another forehand cross. And if you miss that, like, again, like, get it right. So a lot of reps high, and then the volume is just so, volume and intensity, I mean, is just next level, really. I mean, players here will come and they'll warm up, and they'll play a set, maybe a little bit more, and pack it up. Whereas, like, at Nadal's, it was like they'd already been training 2.5 hours, 3 hours, and I was like, oh yeah, I think we got time to fit a set in. Like, we'll play a match now after like 2.5 hours training. Do you know, like, that was just like, what do you mean? Like, we've got half an hour to fill. Like, we're not gonna waste it. Whereas we'll just go home, we'll warm up, play a set, 45 minutes, feeling pretty good, and then go home.
Yeah. Is that the biggest difference that you feel is happening over in Europe compared to here? Because you're right. That's definitely what's happening.
Well, the volume, the volume and the intensity is one thing that stands out, and clearly it's the hunger.
Yeah.
Like, going to when you play a tournament in Australia, there's just no shortage of a practice court or a warm up court. There's courts everywhere. You take it for granted. Whereas over there, it's like, you just like you can't even get on a court. And if there is, you're always sharing a court. You're always trying to hustle a half an hour here or a court over there. Whereas here, you just set your time and rock up and the court's free. Do you know what I mean? So there's a very different philosophy around it. I mean, there was even these kids in Europe. They played this doubles match. They won the doubles match like pretty easily and shook hands and then like quickly ran down the opposite ends to fit in 5 minutes of hit in Portugal before the next match came on the court, because they just was like, there's a court free for 5 minutes, and that doubles was pretty easy. So like, I've got to hit some balls, like probably get ready for tomorrow, or like any ball they can hit. Yeah, that
mindset takes you places. Yeah. Underpinned by, you got to love the hard work, which is, I guess, the suffering element that you're talking about at Rafa's, and the discipline element of not missing the same stuff over and over again. Like just boom, those embedded into the training consistently, maximizing every minute. Doesn't matter if you continue on the tennis path, you're going to be rocking in other areas. That's awesome life skills.
There's just, I mean, on top of the things that they get right, there's just good players everywhere. Yeah. Like you look around and you just, he can whoop your ass. And then that guy can whoop his ass. And it stems from when you have Rafa training there. Mm-hmm. So, and then think like, okay, so Rafa's training there, and then just work your way down. Yeah. So every time we've been there, there's been pros. Mm-hmm. Karatsev, Benoit Paire, on top, and then you filter in the guys that are 300, 400, like lots of them. So the culture there, just through who's there, like, is driving an intensity that is unrivaled, really.
Yeah, that's a big one. Yeah. I mean, even on such a small scale, when we've had nights, we've had really good players, local players playing at our courts, and then you see all of the other young kids that are just like trying to aspire to be at the higher level. You can see the intensity that filters down the courts from the top court all the way down to the bottom, and you can just feel there's just like an energy, there's a hunger. I think everyone kind of strives to work their way up. Yeah, and it's a really inspiring environment to be around. Yeah,
natural too. Yeah, not forced. Yeah.
It just is the best, because you look a little bit silly if you're not training. Yes, because you got these guys on the other end that are absolutely just like bringing absolute hustle and intensity to their practice, and you're over here just kind of missing balls in the net every couple, and it's just like, you can't be here anymore. You don't belong here anymore.
I just think that's a massive piece. Like what I'm hearing there is just environment. Yeah, like when you're in the right environment, like how. I don't want to use the word say success, but like your likelihood of success becomes so much higher just by placing yourself in the right environment, as does if you get it wrong, whether you're hanging around the wrong people or you're hanging around people you shouldn't be, or you're doing activities that you shouldn't be doing, or all these things. That's environment. Yeah. and you can control that. Yeah. Like you get to choose where you putting your attention or putting your time. But yeah, environment.
Yeah. I think that's shaped by some of these values that you're talking about, with discipline, hard work, all of these things. It's you're creating this environment that is going to be just like a melting pot for success. But you got to stay true to those standards. And if you kind of like, I guess, those standards slip, that's when things can kind of get maybe fall out of place a little bit. I think that's a couple key things that are important. You got to stay true to that.
Yeah, standards. Managing the relationship and driving the standards. That's key to it. Yeah, key to an environment, like a healthy, growth-inducive environment.
Yeah, in any business, anywhere. It doesn't matter, sport, whatever. Yeah. Because as soon as you let those boundaries and standards slip, it's just like so many issues can pop up, spot fires, and then they start to turn into bigger fires if they're not addressed. But I think that's a key one. Is coaching changing in any way for you? Like, you've been on the journey for quite a long time. Do you feel like there's a bit of a shift? Have you been at different levels of coaching? Do you
Yeah.
feel like there's anything that you're starting to see or change?
I'm not necessarily sure coaching's changing. I think we're becoming more professional as a profession type thing. Like, I think people are realizing that it's or a potential career. I don't laugh at it, but like I've had a lot of people like, oh, you coach full time? Like they're surprised that it's like actually my job type thing. So I think, in terms of say coaching changing, I think coaching's progressing in many areas. I think it's becoming more professional. I think it's becoming, like I said, a more serious type vocation for people. It's a career path. I truly believe that.
It comes with the game evolving though.
Yeah.
Because you can just observe from the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, the game has changed massively. The players become so much fitter, stronger, faster. Strength and conditioning has gone through the roof. People are really looking after their bodies more. Technology of rackets is improving. And people hitting such a good ball and moving out of control. The athletes that are coming to tennis are just insane now compared to before.
Yeah, definitely. It's I think the sport's in a really exciting period. Like I think the sport's in great shape. And I think the commercialization of the sport I think is going to be huge over the next 5, 10, 20 years.
In what way? Where do you see that? Or how do you see that unfolding?
I mean, I always look to outside sports. I mean, Theo talks about this a lot. But just see what they're doing on the golf tour with that live golf tour.
Yeah.
Other sports follow, like I'm
Netflix series, just like Instagram, YouTube, the social media side is just really popping the way they market it.
You copy what works.
Yeah, it's becoming more exciting for people to watch. I think what I observe is the kind of almost tilt towards NBA in a way. The way it's marketed is more exciting. A lot of exciting players that maybe don't get the best results, but get a lot more traction and viewing. So obviously like Kyrgios, Tiafoe, as like these showmen.
Yeah.
And they're getting a lot more airtime to be like, you don't have to be like your Roger, your Rafa, your Novak.
Yeah. Well, I think that's just athletes now have a greater platform to actually express who they are via social media, via all these, and traditional media too, to actually showcase who they are as a person. And I think that's enjoyable for those guys. Like, I think a guy like Nick or TFO would get a lot of, like, that's what they want to do. They want to be that guy. So I think, it's exciting for the sport, I think.
Yeah, it is exciting. It's heading in a new trajectory. I think people like Alcaraz, we've never seen guys as good in terms of how good he is at that age and how complete he is. And then his coach saying he's probably at like 60% of what he's capable of. It's like, oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
I don't want to see him at 100%. Wow.
Yeah.
And then just someone like Novak and Nadal, how much they've evolved over their career as players. Because if I look at them at the same age as Alcaraz, they were so incomplete to what Alcaraz is at the same age. And I think that's a byproduct of how well people have been coached and how the coaching is getting better and how we're learning more about how the game works and then how to actually structure proper programs. And I just think about what would happen if someone like LeBron James as an athlete played tennis. Because sports like basketball, they just take those athletes.
Yeah.
I just think of what would happen to the game if athletes like that started playing tennis.
Yeah. Well, it'd be how tall is he? 6'10" or something.
Yeah, be close to 7 foot, I reckon.
And, crazy. I mean, really, it would. And I'm not just speaking about LeBron, but you would break it down because there's 4 real components that are key to being good at tennis, and it's kind of done through Tennis Australia's research, and I think Andrew touched on it in one of the previous episodes. But power, movement, tennis skills, and competitiveness. So an athlete like that you know, if he built and developed his tennis skills, then he would be going great. Yeah.
Yeah. It's super exciting.
Yeah. But I do think I wouldn't be shocked if like coaching becomes more specialized. We've already seen parts of it, but like, you know, as the game grows commercially, I think coaching will grow like in line with that. And I think there's space for like real niche type specialization, like guys coming to work on their transition game and net game and that only. Or just strategy, how O'Shaughnessy did some stuff with Djokovic just in that component. I think I wouldn't be shocked to see more of that, like really like, oh, like he's working on, you know, my serve and how I hold serve, and this guy's working on how I return and break.
Yeah, and collaborative as
yeah.
a little bit more.
I'm not, yeah. There's a lot, it's tough because it's tough finding coaches that can collaborate and working with each other. But I'm not, I wouldn't be shocked if that becomes more common.
Yeah. I mean, Djokovic has been doing that for a long time.
Yeah.
Just bringing guys in. Federer even did that as well for specific elements of their game.
Yeah.
Who was it that helped? Was it Woodford that helped Djokovic with his volleys? And he volleys great now compared to how he used to volley.
Definitely.
It's like massive change.
Yeah.
And it's cool to see that there's holes in the guy's game that are still at the most elite level. And it's cool to see how they transition and progress and know that they're working on it too.
Yeah.
And that's what's necessary if you want to go to the absolute highest levels. You've got to be complete in every way. And then throw in the mindset element of just being an absolute specimen upstairs. Yeah.
Well, the mindset element.
We've been going for a little while now. Are we gonna tuck in, are we?
The mindset element is, I just want to touch, because I worked on a lot of work with a lot of strength and conditioning coaches over the years. And the more experienced type strength and conditioning coach has gravitated towards actually wanting to get the mindset right. So there was, a younger type strength and conditioning coach that was working with one of my athletes, and he just wanted to really delve into what his role was, strength and conditioning. Yeah. But a lot of the more experienced strength and conditioning coaches I've worked with have been fascinated with the mind, and I think that speaks to a lot. And in terms of, for me, like the way I'm interpreting that is like, we can have the body right, we can have the body strong, you can be fast, but if you're not good here, like my work's rendered useless.
Yeah, it's so true, man.
Do you know what I mean? So like, I'm seeing these like really like top level strength and conditioning coaches, and they're like, can we do some stuff in the mind?
Yeah. Yeah, it's important, man. It's the direction that I've gone a lot more in, to go like, if we can't get some core beliefs or patterning going on, or getting that right, that's happening mentally, internally, we can't really move forward. Yeah. And once you start to understand the athlete and their mental processes, you can tap into that. And I feel like the results come really easily once you start to, really get some things clicking in that space. Yeah. That could be a podcast in itself. Yeah. Maybe another time when you're probably back around Adelaide in some point. Who knows when? But I'm pretty happy to leave it there. I think we've had a pretty solid, robust discussion around coaching, and it's really cool to see the journey that you're on and the places you're going and where it's leading you, and then it's just filtering back to us on the ground here at ATA. And I feel like I'm getting a sick apprenticeship from you, learning about all of these things, and I get to use you as a soundboard to really understand a few things, and it just comes from experience, really. Like you're continually experienced, you're open to learning, you're continually growing, and it means that we all kind of benefit and work as a team. And I think that's a sign of any healthy business, is still having connection, like you said early, really initially in the chat, close connection to the founder, really trying to be a sponge and be on the same team to work towards a vision. I feel like we're you're helping us out a lot in that space. So yeah, super grateful, bro.
No, thanks for having me.
Yeah, loved it, man. And we'll be keeping tabs from afar, but wishing you nothing but the best, bro.
Thanks, man. Cheers.